An old game, I know, but for some reason, there was a time when I seemed to be talking about this game too much, and I may have given everyone the impression that I actually think that this is a good game. In all honesty, I don't, but there are some elements to it that I did manage to take away and think, hey, you know what? Those parts weren't half bad. And they did put some thought into other elements of the game. Don't worry though, for all of you out there that are getting sick to death of hearing me bang on about this game, then I'm right there too. But as much as I'd like to not mention this game ever again, it does have a few good points that are worth noting, and I honestly don't think I'll ever stop mentioning it every now and then, until I take it to bed, f*** its brains out and cum all over its face. So prepare for an unhealthy dose of true review juice as I finally put this game on display for everyone to admire, before taking it out back and shooting it. Clive Barker's Jericho, and to save on time I'll just call it Jericho from now on, can be described as what would happen if the Dominican friar Savonarola was allowed to write children's bedtime stories, and for anyone who doesn't know who he is, then it's not going to be a nice tale. You are a part of a special forces team that major in everything spooky, as it becomes apparent that some of your teammates have superpowers. For instance, one character has the ability to cast fireballs from his hands because he sacrificed an arm to a fire demon. Another character has telekinesis, and can directly control one of her sniper bullets, and the main character has the ability of being a whiny prick. But after years of sitting around the Ministry of Magic, Hagrid comes over to tell you that mankind wasn't the first living being that God had made, and that a failed attempt at a perfect being called the Firstborn was born first. But because it turns out that the Firstborn supported Sunderland and not Newcastle, God disowned the creature, who then tried to take over the world as any rational being would. And it's at this point that I had to stop the game and remind it that God was said to have created pretty much everything in existence, including all forms of life before getting to man, so maybe you should read up on your Bible if you're going to rip it off. But back in the day, no not that day, ancient day, some random priests were able to seal up the Firstborn in some kind of town and then got teleported into another plane of existence. That part isn't really explained that well. But because people keep doing evil shit in the area, like littering and not saying bless you when someone sneezes, all of these evil acts build up until the Firstborn is able to make a breach into our world and starts getting aggro on society. This process has happened many times throughout history, and now it's happening again in our own time. Oh my god! And guess who gets to sort things out? Well, not the main character, because he dies even before getting to the main breach. I'm glad that the developers realised that Captain Ross was a tosser and decided to have him killed, which now allows the player to spend the rest of the game doing a drive of San Francisco, except jumping into the bodies of other team members instead of cars. Oh, and the team is called Jericho, if you were wondering why this game is called Jericho, which was made by Clive Barker. The plot kind of peaks at this point for the most of it, until you get near the end and are told that you're going to sleep until the next breach is opened, which spelt out bullshit, as I'm glad that Delgado rightly pointed out, because everyone we've passed before now sure as hell didn't seem asleep. And the less said about the actual ending the better. Basically, the game builds you up to this massive all-out showdown with the Firstborn, but you end up just casting some blood wards at it, and then someone else takes it down. And you end up escaping this parallel world by, and I'm not taking the piss here, jumping into a lake. That's so fucking retarded that it carries itself here. No need to make some sort of joke or reference, you escape an unescapable plane of existence by jumping into a lake. Fucking brilliant. Anyway, enough of the story, let's talk about the game itself, and I think I'll talk about the good before moving on to the bits that I'd imagine you already know. Yes, Father Rawlings, that means you. The game is an FPS. You start off as one character who has the ability to heal people and shoot people, which is a classic example of someone subconsciously expressing their own bipolar disorder. But then you get killed, but not really, and then you can play as any of the other characters, which allows you to change up the gameplay when needed. Each character has their own abilities, some passive, some active, while some characters can access parts of each level that most can't. Each time period you travel to will contain a certain number of levels, whilst the actual gameplay seen during each level kind of reminds me of games like Painkiller, though this is more grotesque and a feast for the eyes, albeit a twisted visual display, whereas Painkiller is just good, clean, killing fun. However, despite being an FPS game, don't go thinking that it's a run and gun. There'll be lots of gunning, but not much running. See, this game has one nasty habit that it seems to get into in every combat situation. A small horde of enemies will start running towards you, trying to give you a massive group hug, but because you're not into that sort of stuff, you'll try and kill them all before they get to you. But the second you kill just one of these enemies, another will rise up out of the ground and take its place. This will inevitably force the player, as well as everyone else on the Jericho team, to just stand your ground shooting in place. and then occasionally going over to heal someone who didn't realise that they had another superpower called crouching down and avoiding fire. Sorry if I'm relapsing back into what's bad, I'll try to stay on point for the time being. So here's what I liked about the game. Well, a few years back, whilst I was but a young and naive scrub, I made a video called The Top 10 Most Messed Up Video Game Locations. The winner of that list was Al-Khali, which is the place you go to in Jericho. As granted by the title of that video, the city was pretty messed up, though in a good way, and I'm glad to say that for me personally, this title has held up over the years. The ground and flooring everywhere you go has become so littered with the dead that they formed a new layer of rotting flesh upon the road. Everywhere you go is disgusting in its own way, and some of the enemies you meet are sickening, such as the boss fight in the Roman period. There's also a strange atmosphere that is present in this game, and it's hard to put your finger on what it is exactly. It could be some sort of primal fear due to the fact that the game is telling me that if I die whilst in the city, I'll become trapped here and will be endlessly tortured for all time, and I suppose that wouldn't be the most pleasant outcome of this mission, if I'm to be honest. Some of the levels are also quite big and epic, though you won't get to explore anything outside of the small corridor that the game sweeps you down. It's more up close to your face than what most games do with impressive scenery by adding it to the skybox. Though I suppose that this isn't really a good point now that I think about it. For me, it's mainly the premise and the atmosphere here, which is unlike anything else I've ever played. And what strikes me as interesting is that whilst Undying and Jericho were both heavily influenced by Clive Barker, enough for his name to make the front title, both of these games feel nothing alike. And whilst I like both of them to some extent, the feeling of Undying is like a goblin on my shoulder, in that I know that something's there, but if I turn around and look at it, then I'll know I'll freak out. Whilst Jericho feels like a generic zombie has walked into the room and shoved my head up its bum. Which is still unique, I'd like to point out. But if you want an example you can relate to, imagine that first scene with the many from System Shock 2, but with better graphics and everything trying to kill you. However, much like that of a zombie's bum, this game has some obvious holes. See, I've just realised why I talk about this game a lot. It's because it has some good examples of how to do it right, and some bad examples of how to fuck it up. The atmosphere and gore, for example, are pretty good, and it's not afraid to try new things. That said, it's damn repetitive. Like I said, kill one enemy, another appears, do this 7 times with every enemy, move 100 yards, repeat process, level complete. Also, despite being dropped into a town dripping with depressing character, ironically, the team you get sent in with haven't got enough character between them to make one generic character. They're basically just a name. No, you know what? They're just remote control cars. No, Church, you're doing it wrong. Give it here. This game could have been more interesting if there were like 6 clones of me, with each of us controlling one character. That way my team would have been of actual fucking use, instead of relying on military tactics taught them by their superiors of stopping the enemy's attack with their face. This means that although you might be carrying the fights by constantly putting out rounds, you'll be forced to break away from the shooting at regular intervals to play nurse with the other members of your team. It gets fucking repetitive every time I get into a fight, start shooting, and within 5 seconds of combat, I hear one of the girls shout out, I know that he went down! The fact that an enemy so much as farted a mile off will cause him to hit the ground faster than a virgin's pants at an orgy. You might as well have told me cows go moo! Also, despite the plot being based on a really interesting idea, you do have to put a lot of faith into it, believing that it'll all make sense, despite the holes and flaws being visible skin deep. Why couldn't the game have made the friendly AI just a little bit more intelligent? Why are there QuickTime events here, where the button prompts are really difficult to make out at a moment's notice? And why introduce brand new mechanics into the gameplay at random moments which only serve to catch us out, and then immediately ditch them afterwards, never to bring them up again? But the biggest question still remains. Should you get this game? Well, I think I've answered that question here, and if you're scratching your heads thinking, no you didn't, then correct, because I don't have a fucking clue if you should get this game either. It's like a dog that swallowed a bomb. It looks like it's going to be fun, but you'll probably not appreciate what happens next.
Life is killing me. I swear.